So if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a...
Congresswoman Jill Tokuda of Hawaii is not the loudest member in the room. She does not open with outrage. She opens with a record. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, Tokuda came prepared with a sequence: Elon Musk, the Pentagon, Doge, defense contracts, a $280 million figure, January 6th, the National Guard, the Marines, and then the question no Secretary of Defense should struggle to answer. Pete Hegseth tried to narrow the issue. Tokuda kept widening the record, because this was not only about one meeting or one protest. It was about the line between loyalty to a president and loyalty to the Constitution. Watch how she builds the case.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DoD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading Doge, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are. And we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gain access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you personally?
On the regular basis, I meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
I'm sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't call
Not just
that a
Los Angeles.
protest.
If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the pleasure.
So if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a representative.
At a time when we have more Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles than we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question, in the last 14 seconds I have, would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen if ordered by the president?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's
I think we
favorite
know your
word,
answer. Thank you, Mr.
and
Chair.
that
I
when
yield
it's
back.
invoked in L.A.
The central contradiction in this hearing was never fully resolved. On one side, Congresswoman Jill Tokuda laid out a sequence: Elon Musk, Doge, the Pentagon, defense contracts, a $280 million figure, then January 6th, then the National Guard, then the Marines, then the question that brought the whole exchange into focus: if the president ordered the military to shoot protesters, would the Secretary of Defense carry that order out? That was the question. And the answer was not a clear no. Tokuda did not present this as a slogan. She built it as a record. First, she asked about access. According to the exchange, Hegseth acknowledged that Musk was invited to the Pentagon, while denying that war plans with China were discussed. But Tokuda's point was broader than one briefing. She was asking whether a private billionaire, with companies tied to major defense work, had been placed close enough to the Department of Defense to raise a conflict question. Hegseth called it an informal discussion, but an informal discussion can still matter when the room is the Pentagon, the subject is defense efficiency, and the person in the room has financial interests connected to federal contracts. That is why Tokuda kept pressing, not because she had a verdict, because she saw a pattern worth putting into the permanent record. Then she moved to January 6th. That shift was not random. It was the legal bridge. If federal force was appropriate during an attack on the Capitol, then where is the line when the force is pointed at protesters? Where is the line when the order comes from a president? Where is the line when the people in the street are not foreign enemies, but Americans exercising First Amendment rights? Hegseth answered by referring to rules of engagement. But rules of engagement are not the same as a public constitutional boundary. They do not answer the question Tokuda asked. She asked what he would do. He said he would not accept a false hypothetical, but Tokuda's final point was that this was not theoretical. She tied it to Los Angeles. She tied it to protests across the country. She tied it to the presence of the National Guard and Marines. Then she asked again, in the plainest terms possible, would he order the military to shoot at their fellow countrymen if ordered by the president? He still did not say no. That is why this clip matters beyond one hearing. It is about whether public officials understand that loyalty to a president has limits. It is about whether military power remains bound by law, accountability, and civilian rights. It is about whether the people in charge can say clearly and immediately that there are orders they will not carry out. Tokuda did not get the answer, but she got the silence. And sometimes, in the congressional record, the silence is the evidence.